this idea that Iran is weak is not, I don't think there's much support for it. Every year we're told that they're on their last leg. That's it, just a few strikes and they'll fall. And every year it doesn't happen.
How it's been weakened. It's been weakened because of international sanctions. Uh, the real has lost half its value over the last year. I think it's 1.4 million reals to the dollar right now. There has been a 5-year drought in Iran, so they can't grow any food, and they have to buy food from overseas, and that's become more expensive because of 52% inflation. No country um, exists very long on an empty stomach. When you don't have enough food or water, and water in this case is also important in Iran because they don't have water coming through the pipes of major cities. You had demonstrations in over 100 different cities of over 1,000 different people this time, and in all 31 provinces of Iran.
Today on Conversations Aloud, we're discussing US foreign policy in the Trump world. And so much has changed and so much to speak about, really. We're joined by Ronald Bee, who is a US foreign policy expert. He's taught political science, national security, and conflict resolution at a number of US universities. He's also held a number of positions, including a public affairs analyst at the International Atomic Energy Agency and as a foreign policy analyst at the Library of Congress Congressional Research Services. Welcome to the show, Ronald, and it's great to have you. So I can't believe it's only been a year since Trump got elected, because it feels like 10 years. So much has been happening. One is, obviously, we have to speak about Greenland. Trump's insistence on acquiring Greenland, I think, obviously shocked many allies. Do you see this as a symbolic posturing, or is it a serious signal that territorial acquisition is back on the table in U.S. strategy?
I think it's a serious signal, but it is also an opening gambit. Like President Trump, when he was a real estate magnate, you open a negotiation with maybe going a little too far, and I think he went maybe a little too far in suggesting that he would invade to take over Greenland. But the idea is that it is a strategic place, and it's a very strategic place for the United States, and it's not the first time that has been discussed by American administrations. Going back into the 1860s with President Andrew Johnson, when his Secretary of State Seward bought Alaska, they were also looking at purchasing Greenland because of its location in between North America and Europe. But what came out of that was a 1951 treaty that allowed the United States to build bases there because they were concerned about, number one, Russia firing missiles over the territory. That it's a very direct way to get to the United States, and so it was a listening post. And that listening post was called Thule Air Base, and is now called Patuxent. It's in the upper west area of Greenland, and there are about 200 American servicemen and women there. It's now a space base because what they do is they track satellites, as well as they want to also listen in on what the Russians and now the Chinese are doing up in that area. So that 1951 treaty is pretty important because it allows the United States to build bases there. And I think uh, while Trump has said wants to acquire this at all costs, including if he needs to take it, I think, as I suggested, that this will be an opening gambit, and the negotiations may have already started in Davos where he's meeting with European leaders today.
Yeah, it's that $1 million offer, which in today's money is about $1 billion.
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting.
And there have been some reports that suggest that there's an offer of 700 billion on the table for Denmark with $100,000
So that
lump sum
yeah,
per person payment available to each of the 57,000 inhabitants of Greenland. And so he's trying to sweeten the deal, if that's actually the deal that's on the table that sort of leaked out, and we're not sure how serious it is.
yeah, but to the point you alluded to before, I mean, America already has bases in Greenland.
But it's more than just about the basis, isn't it? It's about the rare earth minerals that are there. The United States has identified that of the 50 strategic uh, minerals that are needed for national security and economic security, Greenland has 39 of them. There's also oil. President Trump sees this as a potential merger and acquisition rather than as a diplomatic
Well,
problem.
he's a deals guy,
Uh,
so
and yeah, he's a real estate guy. He's a transactional guy, and it has more than ruffled feathers because he has suggested that he will levy another 10% tariff on the 8 countries that in Europe that have opposed his acquiring Greenland, and going up to 25% by June if they don't agree. So
yeah.
it's a different tactic coming from someone that should be an ally, is an ally, and traditionally has been the United States. And so this is a different way of doing business.
Yeah, I think the confusing part for many people is that you could get into deals where the U.S. can obtain the assets, the minerals, the oil, the everything that Greenland has without owning the land. It's giving them access and giving them the interest, kind of what they try to do with Ukraine, where they make a deal
Right.
where they get access
And
to those.
yeah, that deal was for rare earth minerals, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the idea there was, well, the United States has spent an awful lot of money in defending Ukraine against the Russians. What's in it for us other than a major bill at the end of every week? So that was his approach there, which is again not very diplomatic, and it is in our interest to prevent Russia from marauding across the European continent, first and foremost in Ukraine. But he always sees things through a lens of America first, and I think he does value alliances, but he wants to know what we're getting out of it rather than what we're giving to it.
Hmm. Do you think that Russia and China are loving this stance on Greenland? Because
Well, I think they certainly are in terms of Greenland. I don't think they are in terms of Venezuela and Iran. Because there is also a certain connectivity here. That is security in resources, or resource security, if you will, and preventing others from having access to those resources that will become very strategic for all parties down the road.
yeah, it seems we'll go into Venezuela and Iran, which to me Venezuela seems like a very China play. But in terms of Greenland, it's he's using pretty much what Putin used to go after Ukraine. We need this for national security.
Well, I'd say it's little different in Putin's sense because Ukraine has a special history. I spent time in the former Soviet Union right after the Berlin Wall fell, and their view of Ukraine is that it's part of Russia, that it came from it's always been part of Russia, and that the Kievan Rus was there for 600 years, and the name Rus is actually where Russia comes from. The European Union having a trade deal, and then what would soon follow afterwards would be NATO, and so Putin being paranoid about NATO from his days as a KGB officer in East Germany, saw Ukraine as part of his vital national interest to go in. And there is some parallel there in that Trump sees Greenland as part of a vital national interest to make sure it doesn't fall under the influence of the Chinese and the Russians.
Is the US moving away from alliance based leadership towards something closer to 19th century power politics? Or was it always like this and we're just seeing it as it is because Trump says it as it is?
Well, I think that there were concerns. Democratic and Republican administrations saw that Europe, or at least felt in some way, that Europe was interested in more in national serenity than national security, and that the United States was having to foot the bill for it. That was okay for a while, especially in the aftermath of World War II, because we did devote 3% of our GDP to the Marshall Plan to help rebuild Europe and Asia for that matter, because we saw it in our best interest. And it's still in our best interest to be an ally of Europe because we do $3 trillion worth of trade. Economically, politically, and militarily, it's in our interest to be allied with like-minded democracies. And so that's still the case. And I think at the bottom line is that we're better off with NATO than without it. And I think that is still the main view in the United States, although President Trump will use it to leverage more benefits for the United States by asking that Europeans contribute more towards their defense. The Germans have done so, the Danes have done so, but Europeans also recognize that that the United States may have different policy priorities in terms of the future than they do, and so they're going to have to get their act together in terms of organizing defense, as I believe Britain and France have already recognized.
Mm, for sure. I want to move to Iran. It's clear that the U.S. is intending to carry out, to me, it feels like regime change in Iran, which is odd because it's the opposite to President Trump's stance before the election and especially during his visit in the Middle East in May 2025, where he
Right,
declared an end to American interventionism. He stated the U.S. would no longer give faraway nations lectures on how to live. He criticized
right.
nation builders. What do you feel changed?
And no forever wars like Afghanistan and Iraq, that sort of thing. And on the other hand, he's given the authority for the American military to conduct operations in, by my count, 8 countries at this point. Uh, eh, so, uh, but those operations have been quick strikes, uh, get in, get out, few boots, if any, on the ground. In Venezuela, there were 200 with 150 planes to get them in and get them out. Against Iran, there were B-2 bombers that dropped ordnance on 3 nuclear sites with the help of the Israelis in their 12-day war that took out all the air defenses. And in Nigeria with special forces, and in Somalia, special forces. In Iraq, it's been special forces going after ISIS elements. In Syria, there were the same thing, attacks on ISIS elements. So Somalia, special forces operations, but there was also attacks against the Houthis that were shooting missiles out of Yemen at shipping, and Israel for that matter. Most of these have been quick in, quick out, very targeted precision attacks that really started during the Obama years with drones and special forces. And now I think Trump has taken it to a new level. But Iran is going to require more than just an easy in, easy out. So that's what everybody's thinking about now, because buildup of forces that we see. There is a U.S. USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group that arrives in the Middle East area. We don't know where, and they won't tell us, of course, within 3 to 5 days. And that strike group is more powerful than many nations' entire militaries. So that with the 20 bases that the United States already has there, and reinforced deployments of airplanes as well as troops, something is about to happen there, and the question is, how big will it be, and when will it be?
Well, that's the worry, because I feel like Iran is a completely different kettle of fish than a lot of other.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. It's 3 times the size of Iraq, in terms of geography, and it's 3 times the population, 90 million people. And, there are quite a few, members of the, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and their thugs, the Basij, that are in the business of killing protesters. If regime change is actually on the menu, it's a tall order because it means much more than just sending in tomahawks, using the attacks on the protesters. But if it is regime change, this is a whole another order of business. I know that's what Israel would like, simply because Israel has been fighting the proxy wars with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, for since at least 2005, and it's all been funded by Iranian sales of oil to China. The issue is also very important for Israel and our other Arab allies in the neighborhood because they could be retaliated against when some sort of action takes place against Iran.
Yeah, I mean, it's very worrying for the Gulf areas, because there are many U.S. bases. There's the Strait of Hormuz over there, which is it's not that large, and
21 miles, 21 miles. It's a choke point, and everyone always worries about Iran sinking a couple of tankers in there, which 1/5 of the world's oil goes through. And we've already seen some worries about that in the marketplace, where price of oil has gone up. And whenever there's a conflict in the Middle East, the price of oil goes up. We have diversified sourcing, and Saudi Arabia also has another way to get the oil out other than the Persian Gulf. So we've sort of cushioned the potentialities of Iran shutting that down, but we worry about it, as we should, because that's a very important shipping lane. But it would also shoot them in the foot too, because what's the only thing they make money on? Selling illicit oil to China, and that has to go where? Through the Straits of Hormuz.
yeah, I mean, I guess if their back to the wall, they're going to react in whatever manner they feel they can.
Yeah, that's the concern. That's the concern. And so, what do they have left? They don't have much of an air force. They don't have much of a navy, and so they have missiles. And so that's what's likely to be used. And they have lots of drones, as we've seen be used in Ukraine. So there is this sort of axis of authoritarianism with China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and formerly Venezuela, yet to be determined how that's all going to play out. But a group of nations that have been cooperating under the radar and against Western nations' interests to, and a lot of it has to do with energy.
Yeah, I guess they would say that the West is working against their interest, and
Of course.
it's how it works.
Yeah, from their national point of view, you have to understand that. And you can't mirror image and expect everybody to think like you do, but you certainly can't mirror image what I would call adversaries that see you as a problem rather than as somebody to cooperate with.
Yeah, I feel like this idea that Iran is weak is not. I don't think there's much support for it. It feels like,
That Iran is weak, is that what you mean?
yeah, every year we're told that they're on their last leg. That's it, just a few strikes and they'll fall. And every year it doesn't happen. And we saw.
Well, this is a bit different, though, I think, because this is the largest street demonstrations you've ever seen in Iran since 1979. How it's been weakened. It's been weakened because of international sanctions. The rial has lost half its value over the last year. I think it's 1.4 million rials to the dollar right now. There has been a 5-year drought in Iran, so they can't grow any food, and they have to buy food from overseas, and that's become more expensive because of 52% inflation. No country exists very long on an empty stomach, and people go to the streets. That's been the case since the French Revolution. That when you don't have enough food or water, and water in this case is also important in Iran because they don't have water coming through the pipes of major cities. You had demonstrations in over 100 different cities of over 1,000 different people this time, and in all 31 provinces of Iran. So that the people are upset for good reason. And this is the largest demonstrations we've seen. There have been others in 2009 and 2022-23. There was a response to the young woman who was killed for not wearing a hijab. Was it Masra Amina? And during those demonstrations, it was either economy or the price of oil, or in this case, in 22-23, women's rights. And so, what happened in these demonstrations for the first time is that they started in the bazaar. It started with the merchant class that said, "Well, we can't sell our goods now because of all these uh, sanctions." The economy is different. Their proxies have been leveled in in the case of Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis over the last since October 7th, 2023, when Hamas slaughtered Israelis. The Israelis have come back and and I might say destroyed Gaza, done the same to Hezbollah. I mean, the targeted assassinations of the leadership of Hezbollah, most of its organization, is gone. They've also attacked the Houthis. So, if the proxies have been weakened, how else can Iran operate other than through non-state actor, terrorist incidents and the shooting of missiles? And so
Well, the missiles is
that's
the
what
issue, right? Because we don't know. It seems they have a capability that is better than first expected, and the amount of missiles is unknown. And they can.
Well, they have a lot of drones, and the drones have been manufactured to the tune of 1,000 a day, by some estimates, and if and they've been supplying them to the Russians for Ukraine. At this moment, they're probably thinking more about themselves than they are about supplying missiles to Russia for Ukraine, because they have a president of the United States that has come out and said that, well, leadership needs to change. As said to the protesters, help is on the way, in those very words, and take names because they're going to be held responsible. The only way that could happen is if somehow there's regime change and another form of government is put in place by the people themselves or others, isn't it? I mean, I don't see any other way for that to happen.
Well, that's the intention of the U.S. And of course Israel. The worry is that we have seen U.S. intervention in the Middle East, and it has not been good. I mean,
Well, trust me, I know. I was in Washington during most of it. The invasion of Afghanistan was necessary. The invasion of Iraq was not, but it was necessary because there were fears of weapons of mass destruction being built,
they were not.
which were taken care of by the IAEA, the organization I worked for Hans Blix when he first became the Secretary General of the IAEA, and I remember meeting him in Washington after the invasion of Iraq. He was at a meeting the Carnegie Corporation that has its annual non-proliferation meeting. And he said, Mr. B, how are you? You'll see that my book, This Army in Iraq, is still on the nonfiction list. And, foreign policy jokes aside, uh, it was, even in George W. Bush's memoirs and that of George Tenet, the CIA director, they regretted going into Iraq because of what was faulty intelligence. And if our intelligence was bad in Iraq with a country of 30 to 40 million, what about a country of 90 million? And we could rely to a certain extent on Israeli cooperation, as their Mossad is pretty good on. In fact, it's great on intelligence in Iran. But the point being, uh, what sort of outcome do you want? We're really good at deposing dictators, but not so good at nation building, as we found out in both Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is that if there happens to be a regime change by a U.S. intervention and Israel intervention, it'd be similar to what has happened in the other countries like Iraq, where a civil war erupted, 1 million died, Libya destroyed, Syria doesn't exist anymore. Really, it's a faction of Turkey, Kurds, Israel, and other ISIS.
Yeah, it was a mess, total mess. And I was doing military to military dialogues in the Middle East from 2000 to 2006 with 22 different militaries. And so I saw the whole thing, and we saw the whole thing from 9/11, War on Terror, invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and the election in January 2006 when Hamas took over Gaza. And it was very clear to me at that time that there would be no peace in the region for at least 20 years. And how long has it been?
Yeah, 20 years exactly. Um,
Yeah.
so you've worked in the Atomic Agency. Iran was negotiating with America last year.
hmm
Um,
Had a deal with the Obama administration, and then it was rejected by the first Trump administration. The Biden administration reengaged, tried to get it back on track. That did not happen, and then Trump, of course, is not interested in it whatsoever. And I think he was influenced by Bibi Netanyahu, who they have a close relationship, and just inherently trusted what he had to say. And certainly more than trusted what he had to say, put American assets on the line in the bombing of the three nuclear sites, Isfahan, Fordow, and Natanz. So the it's hard to know because it's all quite hush hush in terms of secrecy about how close Iran was getting to a nuclear weapon, but signals suggest, at least out of the Trump administration, that they were within a couple of months of being able to get one, and so that's why they went. It probably won't ever come out uh, because it's top secret and that kind of thing. It was certainly Bibi Netanyahu's longstanding concern. I remember being in Israel in 2005, and that's all they were talking about is the uh, Iranian nuclear program. The chief of staff of the army was from Iran, an Iranian Jew, and he says, "Look, I'm Iranian. I don't trust them further. I can throw them, and I know they're building a nuclear weapon." That was in 2005. All right, and in 2005, that's when the missiles started arriving out of Gaza into Israel. 2005. So I went to Israel and I met with the guy who was the mayor of Sderot, right there on the other side of Gaza, and he said, "Well, you're dealing with the Arabs. Are they having any better feelings about the Israelis?" And I said, "I hate to tell you, but no, not really." He says, "Well, I guess we're going to have to live like this for a while longer." And I says, "I'm afraid so." And they had instituted bomb shelters and playgrounds and things like that because he had pictures of 35 children that had been killed by the rockets, the Qassam rockets coming from Gaza, and now we'll have many more pictures of Palestinian kids who have been killed um, by the Israeli intervention. So the problems there, there seems to be one step forward and then two steps back, and that's been a problem in the Middle East for a long time. Whenever there's a glimmer of hope, then somebody comes and squishes the candle. And I wrote a book about the history of nuclear weapons, and I got an award called the Christopher Award for it. I named my son after the award. And the Christophers are a Catholic organization that believes that it's better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness. I've been involved in diplomacy because I think the candle is important and more important than the darkness. But there's been more darkness of late in the Middle East than there have been candles.
For sure. Just slightly going back to the negotiation that was happening in Iran and the US last year. From my understanding, is the Iranians pretty much gave all the concessions that they can, other than completely removing the nuclear operations before Israel came in and killed the negotiating team. Is that your understanding too? Did they give all the concessions that the Americans wanted?
Well, it sure was enough for both the Obama and Biden administrations. They thought that this was the best deal, and the Europeans were involved in this too. Um, uh, so as was Russia. So I think that they got the best deal that they thought they could get, and that it would delay, if there was to be a nuclear weapon, for at least 5 years, and that was a good deal. But for the Israelis, it wasn't a good deal, and the Israelis convinced the Republican Party that it wasn't a good deal, and more importantly, convinced Donald Trump that it wasn't a good deal. And you'll note that Trump was the first one to actually put an American embassy in Jerusalem, which had been promised by many administrations. And so that's another indication that of his affiliation, not just for Israel, but for Prime Minister Netanyahu. So I think there were concerns about the nuclear agreement in terms of, was it enforceable if there was cheating involved, and the Israelis put the emphasis on the cheating and not on the agreement, whereas the Democrats put the emphasis on the agreement and not the cheating.
Yeah. Although, from my understanding, is that they moved the enriched uranium, 400 kilograms of the enriched uranium from those.
Yeah, that's an open question. They're not sure if they got it or not. Um, uh, and you and I will probably never know, but there are ways to determine that, and that would be an intelligence issue, going and measuring radiation levels after something's been bombed, and you can actually do that from remote platforms if necessary. And so it's I'm sure somebody knows where that uranium is, and certainly the Iranians do.
Mm. I mean, to me, it seems like we'll never get into a deal because Israel obviously sees Iran as a threat, and it wants a weak Iran. It wants a disintegrated Iran because that removes the risk of.
Well, they used to be allies before the Ayatollah. Israel and Iran were allies. I mean, they got along just fine, and so did we, for that matter. But we had other reasons. We installed the Shah of Iran in 1953, along with your MI6,
Yeah. Remove a
because
democratically
Mossadegh,
elected prime minister and install the
yeah,
Shah.
Mossadegh was there for 2 years, and when you nationalized what became British Petroleum, and Chevron didn't like it either. That was one of the major reasons why there was the installation of the Shah in 1953, and that also the United States sold the Shah everything except the atomic bomb, and turns out he had a secret nuclear program to develop it himself. the Islamic Revolution took over, they didn't recognize for a few years until the middle of the Iran-Iraq War, when Iraq was bombing Bushehr, and they wondered why, because they figured out they thought they were building a nuclear weapon, and certainly that got Iran more interested in building a nuclear weapon because Saddam had made it pretty clear he wanted one.
Mm.
So the history of nuclear weapons hasn't always just been about Israel in Iran. It also has its roots in Iraq.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's 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 interesting that Iran is still standing up after sanctions since 1979. Sanctions on and off, severity different, and then followed by the Iraq-Iran war, where the U.S. was supplying weapons to Iraq. 8-year war that killed millions, and it was devastating.
Terrible war. 2 million casualties.
Yeah, and I guess from one perspective, you could understand why Iran has this view of the U.S. Because of everything that's happened since then, removing the democratically elected prime minister, invading Iraq, which is
And the connection with the Shah. I mean, the U.S. put him there and supplied him with, and the Shah was seen as anti-Islamic.
And he was brutal to some extent, because he had Savak, which was the
yes, he did his own secret police, and he didn't allow political parties other than his own to operate or to even run, for that matter. And so he became a dictator and declared himself emperor. Other than that, but the United States also had national interests there. But the fact of the matter is that the Shah was a strong man that while tried to westernize the country, and did so through oil sales, also was a strong man and didn't allow any dissent. Certainly didn't allow any political parties other than his own. It's not our fault that he did that, but it's our fault that we put him in there.
Yeah. And he was brutal. I mean, he did through Savak kill quite a few people. I want to end with kind of Trump. Critics say that President Trump creates instability. There's no arguing about that. But some argue that the unpredictability kind of deters adversaries more effectively than consistency. Is the strategic uncertainty actually a feature?
It's part of the game. That's part of his game.
Yeah.
It mixes things up, gets people uncomfortable, and then sits down and brokers a deal. We're going to have to choke China off everywhere, and that's a public statement made before going into private negotiations. And I think it's a tactic. It's a dangerous tactic if you're used to the beautiful words of President Obama, who could talk his way through anything and come out the other end with everybody applauding, but nothing ever got done. And so Americans are now, they chose somebody who they think is going to represent their interests overseas, where they haven't been represented before. And so he has got a different approach. Some don't like it. I would prefer a more diplomatic approach, having gone through Oxford University, and knowing the importance of debate and compromise at the end of it by going to the pub and having a beer and figuring it out. I think it's just a different approach. I don't think he's going to destroy the NATO alliance. I don't think he's going to invade Greenland or Canada, for that matter, but he uses this as an opening gambit for negotiations to get what he wants. In this case, more like a merger and acquisition of Greenland. I think what will happen is there will be negotiations somehow with the Greenlanders over this, because they have a certain degree of autonomy through a 2009 agreement from Denmark, and we'll talk to Denmark about what we can do in terms of more bases, which is what the 1951 treaty allows. But it certainly got Greenland on the map, didn't
Yeah,
it?
for sure, it did.
Yeah, and it's certainly on the map at Davos and will be on the map for the foreseeable future. But then while we're looking at Greenland, what's going to happen in Iran,
Yeah,
right?
that's the worry.
And so that's part of the deal too. Get everyone's attention new in the news cycle on something else
Mm.
while you're planning to do something very important.
Well, we've already moved away from Venezuela, and that just happened a couple days ago because
Yeah, it's still unsettled.
yeah,
The 1/10 of the American fleet is still there.
yeah,
And it's there because they're negotiating with the vice president, now interim president, on what to do next.
yeah. Well, do you not worry about the kind of, I guess, escalation, especially with Russia? Europe bombed their nuclear fleet.
That's the one I worry about most. I worry about that the most because they're involved in a conflict which they consider in their vital national interests. And they've threatened to use nuclear weapons about 275 times from the last count that I saw from George Perkovich at Carnegie. And at some point, that becomes a hollow threat. But if at the same point, 20% of Ukraine goes to Russia, what else will they want to look at next? And more of Ukraine or others that are part of NATO, including the Baltics. Poland is concerned; they've been probed with drones and the like. And any of us who've studied history know that World War II started in Poland. So the idea of another war on the European continent, one where there are now nations that have nuclear weapons, is of particular concern to anybody that has a brain.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, the Ukrainians bombed the nuclear fleet, the bomber fleets in Russia, which they use
Yeah,
as deterrence.
and they've gone off to energy
And I
sites.
saw reports that they tried to, well, they hit the compound of Putin, his house residence.
Yeah, that's they went after it. Well,
I mean, that's just unbelievable.
and the only reason why Zelensky is still on the planet is because he's got people telling him where to move and get out of the way because he's not in one place very long. It's going to be a long, hard negotiation in Ukraine, and Ukraine is going to have to face some very difficult prospects of giving up part of its territory for peace, which is going to be hard because their constitution says that they want to become part of the EU and they want to become part of NATO. So there's going to have to be a referendum of the Ukrainian people if they're not going to join NATO.
Mm.
So, and that's going to have to be part of any agreement with the Russians because the Russians don't want Ukraine in NATO. They might look at back in 1955 agreement with Austria when the Soviets left Austria in exchange for neutrality. Of course, there wasn't a war that went on 4 years with dead Austrians and Russians at stake, and now folks have dug in because of the casualties that have occurred. Over 1 million casualties in Ukraine over these last 4 years. It's terrible and horrific, and it's reminiscent of World War One at the Somme and the terrible losses of life there. But this is the 21st century, by God. And
Yeah,
have we ever learned anything? Well, obviously, um, we have to relearn it again. But Ukraine is a terrible, terrible tragedy.
for sure. I mean, just on the NATO part, is that even an option for Ukraine to join NATO? Would Russia allow that?
No, Russia will not allow them to join NATO, and so that has to be part of any agreement that they remain neutral. And they could say, well, they could remain neutral for a certain number of years and then revisit it. That would be one way for the Ukrainians to sort of fudge the future. But the Russians are very interested in disposition of military forces in Ukraine after any deal, and they can no way be linked to joining NATO.
Ronald, it's been
That's a no go zone for the
yeah,
Russians. No go
for
zone.
sure. Ronald, it's been great speaking to you. If people wanted to see more of your work or follow you, where can they do that?
Yeah, I also take a group of students to Oxford every year in your country. It's called the Oxford Study Abroad Program in International Relations. You can find information about that at learnthroughtravel.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Instagram, the usual suspects. And I do a lot of TV and radio work that I post on usually on Facebook. So if you want to check out what I'm doing there, Ronald Bee on Facebook, and I think it's Ronald Bee on Instagram too. But hard to keep track of
Yeah,
all these things. But
sure.
very kind of you to ask.
Okay. Thank you so much.